All right, what's up guys? VV back with another video. And in today's video, guys, as you can see on the screen here, we're going to be talking about a concept today. We're going to be doing a Theorycraft style video. We've not done one of those in quite some time on the channel. But today we're going to be talking about a concept known as power creep and talking about maybe can we quantify it? Can we put a value on cards and go from there? And I think the answer is yes. For the most part, I think we can. And that's what we're going to be trying to establish in today's video and kind of going over this whole idea of what power creep is and maybe the direction the game's going. Some potentially concerning ideas, you know, or some concerning cards coming out in regards to power creep. And we'll be talking about that in today's video, okay? So we will not be doing any kind of deck tech today. Today is much more focused on us going over a concept and theory crafting, brainstorming, thinking outside the box, and all that good stuff. It's been a while since we've had one of these on the channel, and I do want to start doing these a little more often where we do kind of dive into a subject, really go, you know, take a deep dive into a certain subject or concept within trading card games or One Piece or whatever, right? So with that in mind, let's go ahead and hop into this. And don't worry, guys, my face will probably be gone for the rest of the video. If we spend a certain amount of, a long time on a certain slide, because I do have a slideshow prepared for us. If we spend a long time on a slide, I'll try to bring my face back into it so you can at least see what I'm saying and see what I'm talking about, right? Get some movement on the screen, because these slideshows can be a little bit boring otherwise, right? Okay, now let's do this, guys. Let's get into it. I will have everything timestamped in the general description and any kind of relevant lists or links or anything like that in the comment section below if there's anything even relevant to that for today's video. Let's do it, guys. One more thing I have to say. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, if I missed something or if you disagree or if I missaid something or misunderstood it, by all means, please help me out in the comment section below, but let's just please keep it civil, okay, guys? All right, let's do it. Let's get into this. Okay. So first things first, guys, what is power creep? So when it comes to trading card games as a whole, there is this concept known as power creep. And on the screen here, this isn't meant to be any kind of specific example. It's just kind of meant to show how cards have sort of evolved over the course of the game's history, over the course of the game's time. Over on the far left here, guys, notice this is Kobe, and I can zoom in on these. Notice his effect all the way back. This is a very by today's cards standards, this is a very cute effect, right? I guess I can go ahead and put my face back in for this part, guys. Notice what this card does. This is a 4-cost, sorry guys, at the top here, this is a 4-cost 1,000 power card with a 1k counter, and check out what it does. Activate main, you may rest this character and KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. That's a pretty fair card, to be honest, guys. Yes, it is repeatable KO, but it's a pretty fair card. It costs 4 Dawn, but it only has 1,000 power and 1k counter. Now, don't worry, guys. In the next slide, we're going to talk about vanilla cards and the value that they kind of balance the game around. We're going to talk about that in the next slide, but I kind of want to show in this first slide here how things have kind of progressed over the course of the game. So at first, we had Kobe here, right? Again, pretty balanced card. No power creep in sight, right? This is just a solid, well-printed, very fair card. We'll call it a fair card, right? Then we get Brook, and this is an alternate art, of course, for Brook. And check this out, guys. We've got a 3-cost, 4,000 power card. So we basically flipped the script on this card and the other one, right? The other card costs 1 Dawn more. It was at 4 Dawn and only had 1,000 power. Well, this guy is a 3-cost. That gives us 4,000 power, and he still has the 1k counter. But look at this, guys. Then he has this incredible effect down here to, on play or when attacking, he can give up to one of your opponent's characters -1 cost for the turn and then KO a character with a cost of 0. Okay, so in this, that's pretty powerful, right? All things considered, what we just saw, this guy can also do KO multiple turns the turn he's played, and then afterwards, when attacking, he can keep getting this effect. Now, yes, it is 1 cost lower that he can hit. The Kobe could hit a 2, and this guy could hit a 1, but being able to on-play this character and get the effect where now they can't even attack into it. Like with the Kobe, he had to rest this character just to be able to KO, right? Well, this guy can on-play, and then every single turn afterwards when attacking. And again, notice the stats, guys. This guy's a 3-cost 4K versus a 4-cost 1K. Very brutal stat differential, right? All right, then finally, let me move my head over to the other side. Now we're at a point where we have cards like Jack in the game, and believe it or not, I think most people, I don't know when people will be watching this video maybe in the future, but at the current time of me recording this video, most people I think will run more Brooks or you'll see Brook more consistently in black decks, which all these cards are black that we just looked at. You'll see Brook more consistently in black decks than you'll even see Jack. And Jack is a 7-cost 8K, a very large card that has his cost increased by 4 while he's on the field, and he can activate main to rest this character, draw a card and trash a card, and then pop a 3 or less. So this becomes a very, very powerful card. However, because of, like I said, things in the game, certain circumstances, you know, the gameplay of how the flow of the game currently, Brook, the middle card we saw, was actually the card, or is actually the card that's being used the most currently. Okay, now let's go ahead and zoom back out. Let me move my face out of the way and let's go to the next slide. Now, this next slide is of utmost importance. We need to talk about how vanilla value is in this game. Vanilla value is one of those, how do I say this? Every card game does need some sort of vanilla value in their cards. So what are we talking about with a vanilla card? And don't worry, we will go back and forth here. And I'm actually going to bring my camera back and make it very small so you guys can kind of see me talking while we say this. Because otherwise it can get kind of boring just looking at a slide. And don't worry, I'll move my face to look at the formula at the bottom in a moment. But this is what we mean by vanilla. For any of the new characters out there, what is vanilla? And just to summarize, what is power creep? We kind of touched on it, right? What is power creep in general? What it's referring to is as the game grows, they have to print stronger and stronger cards to keep, you know, better cards in the game to give players a reason to buy the new set. If they print a brand new set and there are no more stronger cards in there than the last set, then why would you buy the cards, right? There's no reason, because there's no extra power cards or more powerful effects or more interesting mechanics or whatever it might be. So what happens inevitably in pretty much every trading card game is the power level of cards gets a little too it starts creeping upwards. That's why they call it power creep. The power creeps up ever so slightly every set, and then it starts getting to a point where it gets so high that a few things have to happen. Either A, bans have to happen, or B, they have to introduce block rotations to tone the whole set down, or C, all your old cards just become irrelevant. You know, I know I said that in somewhat of a clumsy way, but I think you guys understand what I'm trying to say. If cards get to a certain point, all the cards before it become underpowered and not usable. Okay, so, and also other formats pop out from that as well. There's a lot of factors involved. But now let's talk about what is a vanilla character. What am I talking about when I say a vanilla character? So in the game of One Piece, this refers to a character with no base effect. So remember what we just looked at, guys, on the screen, on the first screen, how these characters have this text box here that's in the middle of every one of the cards. These are called effects. Okay, they're called effects. But notice these cards here, these don't have anything. Look, this even has like a big open box here where there could be an effect, but there isn't one, right? So with that in mind, vanilla characters are cards like that where they have no base effect at all. These vanilla characters may seem boring at first glance. I'm just kind of reading this verbatim, guys, but they help balance the game according to their stats. What do I mean by that? So now I'm going to move my head over to the other side so we can look at this formula, and then we're going to check it on the previous page, or the previous slide. Look at this, guys. Whenever you're calculating the power of a character that has no base effect, a vanilla character, this is the formula. You multiply, so their power will be their cost times 1,000. So in this case, look at the example we have here, Howling Gab. He's a 5-cost character. So okay, so if we want to find his power, well, we're going to do his cost times 1,000. So 5 times 1,000 is 5,000, and then you're going to add 2,000 to that. And that is true completely across the board. Do y'all see this, guys? Every one of these cards. So Pero Sparrow back here, 6 cost. So his power will be his cost, which is 6 times 1,000, 6,000. Plus 2,000, 8,000. And it goes like this right across the board, guys. Y'all see this? 1 costs 3K, 2 costs 4K, 3 costs 5K, 4 costs 6K, 5 costs 7K, 6 costs 8K. And it keeps going in that pattern. That is the pattern in the game. And all cards basically generate their value from this concept and from this idea. But there's 1,000 more power we have to account for. And this is such a brilliant thing that Bandai did with this 1,000 counter here, because it basically gives us the base power of a card, right? And then we have this 3,000 power to mess around with, okay? We get this 3,000 power to mess around with between the plus 2,000 and the 1K counter to add and remove effects, right? To add and remove effects to make the card stronger. So in other words, we might want to take a 1K counter off of a card to give it an effect and then keep it a 5 cost 7k in the case of this Howling Gab example. Or maybe we want to make the card very powerful. We might remove the counter and both 2,000 power to make a very powerful card. So keep that in mind when we're designing cards. I am going to talk about it as we go through each slide. Okay, so next up here, guys, we have Bello Betty. So, all right, let's use that same logic we were just using for the vanilla cards. Okay, well, this is a 1-cost character. So according to that little formula I just gave you guys, this should be a 3,000 power 1k counter vanilla, right? Okay, well, we want to add an effect to this card. We don't just want to have a game full of, nothing but vanillas. So let's add a searcher effect, and that's this on-play effect right here. If you want to read that, pause it and read it so you know what's going on. Okay, no problem. And this also allows for some really interesting and very intelligent design space, because look what else we can do. Okay, here's one type of search effect, but can't we do multiple different search effects? Okay, let's try this Jewelry Bonnie. This is a 1-cost 1,000 power 1k counter, and this is a searcher. So notice the Bello Betty is an on play, right? See where the circle's popping up on the screen? That means the card can only be used the one time, right? It gets the effect one time, and then it's just a 2,000 power body on the board after that. Well, then we have cards like Jewelry Bonnie, a specific searcher. Well, this card can use its activate main every single turn as long as it's alive, right? It can use this effect, and if you restand it, you could potentially use the effect twice in one turn, right? And that's where I'm going to bring my face back into the picture now, guys. That's where things get really interesting, and this is all balanced around the same concept. Okay, well, it's still a 1-cost card, so it should be a 3,000 and a 1k counter, right? If it were a vanilla. Well, here's the thing. This has an effect that can be repeated to do searching, and unlike the Bello Betty card, which cannot search itself up, this card can even search up itself. So they had to take 2,000 power off the top of this card's base stats in order to give it this effect, okay? Let's push it a little further. How far can we push this, guys? Let's push it to the limits. That's always the thing for TCGs and for anything, right? In any kind of game, let's see how far we can push something to the limit and still make it work and still make it be successful. Then we get to Buena Fiesta, or Buena Festa, however you say that. This is a 1-cost 0 power card that it only does. So notice this card, it can look at the top 5 cards, but it can't search up itself. So what happened to the 2,000 power that it would have had from over here, like how Bello Betty had? Well, look at the counter, guys. This is a 2k counter. And that makes it very, very versatile. Now, I don't think there is a set value on certain effects, but they do kind of show us, they give us kind of a hint on what they think with it, right? Because this does make sense per their original vanilla model, at least in my opinion. Because having the 2k counter over just having like, let's say this was a 1-cost 2,000 power 1k counter, dropping all the power off of this card and giving it over to the counter spot, a lot of people actually would like that more, especially in a deck that might not be as aggressive, where it's like, I don't even care about the power on my searcher once it's on the board, because this is an on-play effect, right? I don't care about when this character's on the board. This 2k counter is more important to me in my hand. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about adding more value to cards. So now let's look at Edward Weevil. Edward Weevil is a 4-cost 6,000 power character, right? And look at this. Wait, it doesn't have a counter. Okay, well, what did they decide when they were designing this card could replace that counter? Notice the on-play effect. This is not a vanilla character, right? This is not a character with no base effect. It does have a base effect of on-play draw 1 card. That is very important, right? So basically what they're saying, at least with this card in the 4-cost slot, because that's another thing we'll talk about later, guys, is as the cost goes up, it seems like certain effects kind of linger away. But bear with me, we're not that far yet. So with this card, Edward Weevil, they've decided that this card can lose 1,000 counter and in the place of it get this on play to draw 1 card. Now, some people might say this is a little bit power crept already. This came out in block 2. Notice the little devil fruit down here with the 2 in it. That means block 2. This is from EB01. So some people would say that maybe this is a little too strong. Like maybe it should have been a 4-cost 5k with a 1k counter and draw 1 card. And that actually would have been more balanced in some people's opinion than what this is currently. But at the same time, this is just showing how they push and pull the stats away to get effects, right? Let's look at another example, and I can put my face back on now. Check this out, guys. Nami. So this is a very powerful effect. Let's use the same method we've been using, right? Okay, well, we've got a 5-cost character. Wait, this should be a 5-cost 7k with a 1k counter, right? okay, if I'm losing 2,000 power on my 5-cost character, it better be a very relevant effect. Like with the case of the Newgate where we were, or excuse me, the Weevil, the Edward Weevil, we were drawing a card, right? Well, look at this, guys. We did get to keep the 1k counter, but let's see the effect we get. We get an on-play effect. We'll read that in a minute. And then we also get a trigger. Okay, so we lose 1,000 power. Like, theoretically, guys, use this like, it's like a mental exercise. So imagine like this. We just lost 1,000 power, but we gained it on play, and then we lost another 1,000 power, and we gained a trigger. I'm not saying it's exact values like that, but just kind of let that put things into perspective, right? So that's not too hard to imagine, and the card seems very strong. And some people might be saying, well, that's too strong. Maybe, maybe not, though, guys, because look at this. The on-play does require you to trash a card from your hand with a trigger, a very specific effect there, just to be able to KO a 5-cost character, but it has the upside of if you have 3 cards or less in hand, you can draw 1 card. Okay, not bad. We'll take that, right? And it has the trigger to potentially activate the effect. You don't get the body with the trigger, but you can potentially pop a 5-cost or lower with it. Okay? Now let's look at one more example as we're starting to see how things are going in the game. Look at this, guys. When it comes to the 6-cost Brook, this is a 6-cost, 6,000 power character with no counter. Whoa, okay, so now we're seeing a situation where they took all the power away from this card that it should get for being a 6-cost character, right? For the vanilla, this should be a 6-cost 8k, and we lost the 1k counter. Well, what are we getting in the place of it? We're getting basically 2 different options on an on-play effect. And in this situation here, we can either trash up to one of our opponent's characters. Trashing a card is not the same as KOing, right? Trashing is more powerful than KOing, typically speaking. So we're getting the ability to trash a 4-cost or lower character, or our opponent places 3 cards from their trash at the bottom of their deck in any order. So that's against decks that are trying to fill up their trash, right? Or decks that are trying to self-mill. So that is a very powerful effect. And they determined, Bandai, when they were making this card, they determined that this card was so strong that they had to take away 2,000 of its base vanilla power and its counter for this effect. Now, some people might have differing opinions on these cards, right? That's normal for people to feel one way or another. But with this card, some people might think that this card maybe should have had a 1k counter if it was going to be a 6,000 power character, or let's move the stats around, maybe it should have been a 6-cost 7k with these effects. Who knows, right? So this card, I would say, didn't really suffer from power creep, right? It kind of stayed balanced for what it is, and some people might even argue it's underbalanced or undertuned. But it shouldn't be overstated, guys, how powerful removal is in this game, and you don't even have to trash a card to be able to trash one of their 4-cost or lower characters. And being in the color black in this game, it also has access to cost reduction, where it can get something even bigger. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next slide, guys. So now, enter OP11. I should have said spoiler warning, guys, but sorry, they are just vanillas. But look what we've done now. Whoa. These are 5-cost 6,000 power characters with 2k counters and a 6-cost 7,000 power with 2k counters. I love this idea. Let me say that up front, guys. Let me say that right up front. I absolutely love the direction they're going with this idea for the game. And I will say, though, they did kind of mess up in a few ways, in my personal opinion, with this, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment in these not the next few slides, but the ones right after that, where I think they kind of blundered a little bit with their early game design. And again, we'll talk about that more when we get to those slides. But with these cards right here, I'm a big fan of this. I love that they're playing around with the cost, the cost, not really, but the power and the counter of these cards. Because, guys, logically, with our example that we already looked at, these make complete sense, right? Normally, you would see a 6-cost character with no base effect, a vanilla character, right? With no base effect, you would see a 6-cost 8,000 power character, so it's 1,000 under, with a 1k counter. Well, there's the extra 1,000, right? So we lost 1,000 from over here, and we added it to over here. So I do really love the design idea with what's going on here. Now, let's go to the next one here. Now we're going to look at some other ideas they've done, and I have to give Bandai some credit here and I try to give as much credit as I can. With these cards here, we have not seen 5-cost 6,000 power 2k counters in the game currently, at least if I'm not mistaken, until OP11. We have not seen that on characters with effects. But we will see characters that are lower than that in a moment. Not these next few slides, but the following ones. how do I say this? Like not in 3 slides, but in 4, 5, and 6 slides away, we'll see cards that are statted like this, but have effects as well. And I see that as a potential. It was potentially something that was an oversight on Bandai's part. We'll have to see though. And I really want to know what you guys think about it. So here's a 5 cost 6K and a 6 cost 7K with 2K counters, right, for vanillas. Okay, now check this out, guys. The biggest 2K counters we've seen in these kind of stat lines so far have been cards like this. Satori is a 5 cost, 5,000 power 2K counter character with an effect. The effect is, well, excuse me, it's not quite an effect, it's a trigger though. So as per the rules, this card is not considered a character with no base effect because it does have a trigger. Okay, so check this out. We've seen Satori, right? And we've also seen T-Bone. T-Bone is a 5 cost 5K with a 2K counter. Looks familiar, right? We just saw this with Satori's stat line. And this one has an on play. It doesn't have a trigger. It has an on play to KO a 2 or less character, right? We've also seen X-Drake. This is a 5 cost 5K with a 2K counter. On play, Dawn -1, and then your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. Okay, very cool. These are all 5 cost characters. And look, we just saw the vanilla version of a 2K counter with a 6,000 power effect. Or excuse me, with 6,000 power and no effect. Now we're seeing, this is pretty much as big as we've seen for 2K counters, guys. I don't think we've quite seen any push into the 6, 7, 8 plus range, right? But that's fine. And one thing I want to mention too real quick while we're on this slide is I think these are very well balanced cards. Because notice this, okay, it still all makes sense in my mind as far as a balance standpoint goes. Okay, this is a 5 cost, 5,000 power character with a 2K counter. Well, we're missing 1,000 power, right? Because we just saw, I have to skip back real quick, guys. We just saw what a vanilla a vanilla 2K counter vanilla would look. I just messed that up. We just saw what a vanilla 2K counter character looks like, with no base effect. That's what vanilla means, right? Well, in these cards right here, these aren't vanilla. So we can get rid of the 1,000 power right here, here, and here, and give them these different effects. The trigger in the case of Satori, and then the on-play and the other on-play for T-Bone and X-Drake. Okay? That makes sense. And from a balance standpoint, very happy here. This makes a lot of sense. Now, we're going to go into an area that does concern me, because I think Bandai messed up a little bit. And it's not like it's... horrible. It's not irreparable damage. It's not irreparable damage. It's this is still fine, but check this out, guys. So now we're looking at a 2 cost 3,000 power character with a 2K counter, and it has an on play. If your leader has the Revo army type, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3,000 power during this turn. So this really kind of is just a vanilla 2 cost 3,000 power 2K counter character. However, it has the upside of if your leader has the Revo army type, you can give a character minus 3,000 power for the turn. That is potentially a very big deal, right? But then there are cards like this, like Perona here. This is a 4 cost 5,000 power character with a 2K counter and a very, very powerful effect. It is somewhat limited, but it's still a very powerful effect. I think most people would agree with that. Pause and read it if you don't know what it does. Now let's talk about a little bit of concern I have with this kind of effect. I think it was a slight oversight by Bandai when they were first developing the game and deciding what would be balanced per the the vanilla baseline stats in the game. Well, check this out, guys. This card, I think, actually would have been balanced as a 4 cost 5,000 power 2K counter vanilla character. Because that is what we've already seen. That's the direction they're going with the future of these cards, right? It only makes sense. However, this card is not just a 4 cost 5,000 power 2K counter vanilla character. This also has a very relevant, very potentially powerful effect as well, where it goes off if your opponent has 5 or more cards in hand, you can do this effect. That is very strong, guys. That is a very strong effect. It is limited. It is limited, right? If your opponent doesn't have 5 or more cards in their hand, if they have less than that, then you can't even use it. And in that case, it is just a vanilla card. But I think most people who've played this game long enough know this card, Perona, is very rarely a dead card in hand. Or excuse me, well, it's never a dead card because it's still a 2K counter, but it's very rarely inactive, right, in the current state of how the game runs. Then we have one more example I do want to show you guys real quick with Frankie. This is yet another 4 cost 5,000 power 2K counter vanilla body with some potential upside. Of if you have, well, it just does have upside. If it's in the trigger, you get to draw a card. And then if you have 1 or less life cards, not only do you draw the card, that this trigger gives you, but then you also get to play this character. Very, very powerful. And I think, again, this isn't game breaking, at least I don't think it is, but it's definitely a little bit of power creep that happened. Understand, for anyone who might be watching this in the future or who might be new to the game, understand this, guys. These cards came out well before. Let me move my my camera out of the way. These cards here came out after the cards we just saw. So you would think in this game with like natural progression and things like that, you would think that these vanilla 2K counters here would have happened first, and then over time we see the game creep into this direction. But that's not what happened. Let me bring back the face cam now. These cards happened first, and now we're seeing the vanilla 2K counters pop up, and that's where it seems like there's a little bit of power creep, right? It's like, wait a minute. Per the game's, balance, the way that the cards are balanced on a completely static, vanilla character, this probably shouldn't exist the way it does. It's a little bit overtuned. I think most people, instead of people using words like, oh, that's broken or that's overpowered, a lot of people would just consider this overtuned. And I want to know what you guys think as well in the comment section below. Please do not be afraid to share what you think down there. Okay, moving on from here. So now we're going to look at some other ideas. So understand what's going on this page right here, guys. These are 1-cost, 1,000 power blockers in red, green, and blue. They're all the exact same. Now, they have different names and they have different types. However, they are all the exact same stat line. So with that in mind, we do know that even when, and these are from the very beginning of the game, guys. Like this chopper is ST01, so that came out right when the game came out, right? I don't remember what the rest are, and I kind of clipped off where it is, but just hear me out, guys. All these cards are basically the same. They're 1-cost, 1,000 power blockers for each color represented here, and they do have different names and types, but that's it. Everything else is basically the same design. So if you use the same model that we were using before, where it's like, well, wait a minute, a 1-cost, 3,000 power, 1K counter vanilla character, in order for it to be a 1-cost blocker, Bandai has determined that this is such a powerful utility spot. They took 3,000 power away from this card just to allow it to be a blocker. They took 2,000 power from the actual power stat line, and then 1,000 power away from the counter just for it to be a 1-cost blocker. So you can see where Bandai's coming from, and we do have to give credit where it's due with whoops, what I just hit. Go backwards. There we go. So we do see what's going on here. It looks like in Bandai's mind, they're determining that, okay, for the 2K counter characters that are 4-cost and under, it's better that they have these very powerful effects, right? It just makes more sense, I guess, according to their logic. And hey, I get it. And it does make some sense, right? It does make some sense because otherwise, these smaller cards we're looking at here, if they were just vanilla 2K counters, then, I mean, but at the same time, that's all they would be is vanilla 2K counters. And I don't know if I'm opposed to that. And I do think I think Bandai pushed it a little too far with the cards we see on the screen here up front. I think these should have just been vanilla 2K counters, and then they can build from there in the future if they need to introduce more powerful cards in these slots. And understand, guys, all the examples I'm giving, there are way more examples. I'm just giving you some set examples that I had prepared for today's slideshow. There are much more examples in the game. So here we go. This is, let me just finish up on this slide so we can move forward. Because next we're going to talk about some more interesting stuff on where I think Bandai kind of pushed it too far yet again, but not with 2K counters this time. These cards I think are fine, and it does kind of show us, a kind of a glimpse into the mind of how Bandai thinks about how relevant a 1-cost blocker is in this game. Do you guys think it should be that way, or do you not? Because I'm going to be honest, guys. I think that each little keyword that you put on a card should just subtract 1,000 power each time. Some things should be maybe a little under that. Like, for example, triggers aren't exactly the same as like a on-play effect would be, right? Because you might not even see a trigger. And if you don't see the trigger, the card might just be nothing in your hand, right? It's just whatever it is. So I understand there needs to be some type of push and pull, a little bit of balance. It's a bit of a balancing act going on, right? But in this case, guys, I actually think the 1-cost blockers, I think blocker, maybe for blockers under 3, like 3, 2, 1 cost, 1, 2, and 3 cost blockers, maybe blocker should have been worth 2,000 powers worth, and then they could have kept the 1K counter. I don't know, maybe, right? Maybe that's something they could have messed with. And who knows, we haven't seen 0-cost characters yet. That could have been a very cool idea to have like a 0-cost zero power blocker with no counter, right? Just something to put on the board when your opponent thinks you have no other play. That could have been very cool. It could have been kind of cool. Some people might say it's broken, but I'm just saying I think that could have been kind of cool. Okay, now let's move on to the next slide here. I think this is where it's going to get a little more spicy or something like that, where it's like, okay, now we're starting to see real examples of what I would consider to be power creep. And by the way, I do just want to stress, I do think what we already saw, I'm going to go back one more time real quick, guys. Oh, this is as far back as I needed to go. I do think this was an example of power creep that happened a little too early. It's not game breaking, but who knows how things will pan out from here, because they have to typically build on where they left off, right? So now going into later releases in the game, this is Boa Hancock. This is a 4-cost, 6,000 power blocker with an on-play effect to do a top 3 set. You'll be able to set the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you can give a Rested Dawn card to one of your 7 Warlords, leaders, or characters. So guys, understand what's going on here. So on a vanilla body, we're looking at a 4-cost, 6,000 power, 1k counter, right? Well, remember what we just saw in the previous slide on how blockers used to be tallied for 1-cost characters. They were worth 3,000 powers worth on something like this. Well, check this out, guys. On this card here, this is a 4-cost 6k with no counter. Okay, so let's give him blocker, and then he'll get his 1,000 power back, right? Or this Boa Hancock will be fully accounted for. If you go 4-cost, 6,000 power, and blocker, that would actually seem fairly balanced and still very strong, right? Per just the vanilla stat line in the game. However, this does not just have blocker, does it? This also has an on-play effect down here to do a top 3 search. Well, not quite search, but set your top 3 cards and give your leader or character 1 Rested Dawn. Very, very powerful, right, guys? This is where let me go ahead and move my face over to the other side now. This is where things start getting a little bit out of hand, it seems like. Okay, is this something Bandai intended to push the power level of cards this quickly, this far, this quickly? And we'll have to see what happens, right? We're going to have to see what happens. So let's go ahead and look at the next example we have here, guys. Gecko Moria. Now, this came out before the Boa Hancock did, just to be fair, guys. Sometimes I don't put these in the right order. I'm just trying to put them together for the slide. But hear me out. This is another card where it's like, okay, well, let's just use the vanilla rule. Okay, the vanilla value rule, we might have to call it, right? Okay, so on an 8-cost vanilla body, I could expect an 8-cost, 10,000 power, 1k counter character with no effect, right? Well, in this case, it loses 1,000 of its top-end power here and the 1k counter for an effect, an on-play effect that brings out a 4-cost character and a 2-cost character, 1 active, 1 rested, right? But what does that do as well? Now, it does have to be from your trash, to be fair, right? I'm not trying to misrepresent the card, but you're bringing these cards into play, and now they might have on-play effects of their own. So essentially, what you're getting for 8 Dawn is you're not just getting 8 Dawn. So let me say that. Maybe a better way to look at this Boa Hancock example, guys, is for 4 Dawn, you're actually getting more like 7 Dawns worth, if not 8, if you count the effect to add a Dawn down here. You're basically paying for 4, and you're getting like, I don't know, or excuse me, more like a 5 or 6 Dawns worth. Excuse me, like 4, and then +1 for the on play, and then +1 for the Dawn that it gives. So that's like a 5 to 6 Dawn worth of value card for only 4 Dawn. Now when we go over to Gecko Moria, and guys, value is a very important thing. You have to understand that interpreting card value is a very important thing. When it comes to Gecko Moria, look what you're getting here, guys. You're paying 8, and you're getting 8 plus the 2 of your 2-cost character, and then plus the 4 of the 4-cost character. That's 14 Dawns worth right there, right? For 8 Dawn, you're getting 14 Dawns worth of value, okay? And if you start comboing that with other cards that share the same power spike, the same power creep, then it gets really out of control, right? Then it starts getting very, very powerful. So that's kind of what's going on there. Now, we do have another example. Let me go over to here. And I want, again, guys, tell me what y'all think. Tell me what y'all think in the comment section below. Then the other card, this one's to a lesser extent. This one I just kind of had to add on. But I do think this card is fairly balanced. Believe it or not, people who know me are going to say, yeah, but you're a yellow player, so of course you think the card's balanced. That's right. That's correct. I am. But guys, this is a 4-cost, 6,000 power, no counter. So, okay, it doesn't have a counter, right? Well, we can expect for it to have an effect. Well, not only does it have an effect, it also has a trigger. So this ends up being a 4-cost 6K with an on KO effect to potentially draw a card. It is limited. It's not just a straight KO effect. Your opponent has to have 3 or less life cards, and same thing for the trigger. Your opponent has to have 3 or less life cards to play this card out. So with that in mind, hear me out, guys. With that in mind, this card kind of has the value of something that might be like a 5-cost card that you're playing for 4 Dawn, right? It might, an effect like this might come across as like 5 Dawns worth when you're only playing it for 4 or cheating it out for free from your trigger. That's where it gets really, really powerful, right? Cool. Okay, very cool stuff there. Hopefully this is making sense, guys. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to put that down in the comment section below. Okay, now we got some other offenders here we got to talk about. I'll just keep my face cam on for this because I have a nice little spot in the corner for me. So these are some other perpetrators here, right, guys? Some other guys that might be guilty of power creep. We're going to go from left to right and talk about them. Okay, first up is Rob Lucci. Right, Rob Lucci. So remember what we were just talking about with Gecko Moria. Well, this is a 4-cost card that is a very common target for Gecko Moria. And sometimes it's even done through another character I did not put in the slide called Rebecca. So check this out, though, real quick, guys. Let's analyze Rob Lucci for a minute, right? And this card came out all the way back in OP05. Do y'all see that at the bottom, guys? This card came out all the way back in OP05. And check out this effect. Well, check out the stats, rather. This is a 4-cost, 6,000 power character with no counter. Okay, that seems pretty reasonable. No counter, 4-cost, 6K, and it has an effect. Well, let's read what the effect is. On play, you may place 3 cards from your trash at the bottom of your deck in any order, and then you can KO up to 2 of your opponent's characters, one that costs 1 and one that costs 2. Well, that's very strong. That's very strong. So, hang on. You're telling me for 4 cost and 6,000 power, and I can remove 2 characters potentially with this effect? Yeah, that is what I'm saying. That's what you can do with this card. It's very, very powerful, right? Well, this kind of ends up being a character that probably should have cost 5. To be honest, guys, like this should have been either a 4-cost 5,000 power character with this effect or a 5-cost 6,000 power character with this effect. You see what I'm saying? I don't think they pushed around the stats appropriately, and because of that, this card is actually very, very strong, and it has been for a very long time. So yeah, I like the on-play effect, and I think effects like that should be in the game. Now, for anyone who's followed the channel for long enough, you know that I don't think they should be on bodies nearly as much. I think effects like this should be pretty much specifically assigned to events. I don't think characters should be able to do that. And let's also mention that real quick while we're at it, guys. Like when it comes to Gecko Moria, the higher the cost of the character, it does need to have a more impact or a higher impact, right? Because if I play this card out and it doesn't do enough, I just lose because I just wasted my turn playing out a character that's not strong enough. So I do understand the concept there, guys. We do have to keep an open mind about that. But looking at what we're looking at here, guys, this is a very cheap character in this game. Understand, for those who might be new to the game and to the rules, let me get situated. There we go. For those who might be new to the game or new to the rules or new to black as a color in the game, understand, for Dawn, that's turn 2. That is turn 2 in this game. Turn 1, you get 2 Dawn. Turn 2, you get to 4 Dawn if you go second. Now, if you're going first, this ends up being a turn 3 play. And that's one thing I will mention. I personally think they should have made this a 5-cost 6K that does exactly what it does. And I think that would have been more balanced in the long run. Because then no matter what, whether you went first or second, you could only play this card on your turn 3 play. Right? I think that would have been a little more balanced for the game. Next up is Sabo. Again, let's use the... guys, I love using the this vanilla value system here. Let's break this card down. So a vanilla card would be a 5-cost 7K with a 1K counter. Okay, no problem. We took off 1,000 and we gave this card blocker. Notice this, guys. When a card gets into the 4 or 5 plus range, maybe 6 or whatever range, blocker no longer has as much value in Bandai's eyes, right? Because normally, okay, going off of the 1-cost blocker, that was minus 3,000 power to give blocker to a 1-cost character, right? So in this situation, this should really be a 5-cost 5K with no counter and blocker. Right? But no, what they've determined, another card I forgot to add on here is Borsellino. Borsellino's in a similar area as Sabo is for how powerful the effect is. But check this out, guys. This is a 5-cost 6K with a 1K counter. Okay, well, where did the 1,000 power go? It went to blocker. But wait a minute. There's another effect here, isn't there? Hey, wait a minute. Something's not right. And it's not that it's not right, but it seems a little bit overtuned compared to what we should expect from cards. And in the case of Sabo here, not only does it get the 5 cost and the 6k and the 1k counter and blocker, which would have all made sense if it was just that, a 5 cost 6k, 1k counter with blocker, that would have all made sense. But no, it also has an on-play effect. The on-play effect is, okay, none of your characters can be KO'd by effects until the start of your next turn, and then draw 2 trash 2. An absolutely incredible on-play effect, by the way. I think this card would have actually been very balanced if they took away the 1k counter. That's the one gripe I have with this card. I think it's slightly overtuned in terms of like the value we can expect from just a generic base level vanilla card. I think it's slightly overtuned with the 1k counter on there. So some people might say it's overtuned from the on-play effect. You might be onto something there, but just, try not to get too technical. Okay, next up, guys, let's go ahead and move over. Actually, I'll move it back this way. I think it makes more sense to move this way, and then I'll move my camera over. Now we're over here on Jinbei. So Jinbei is a 4 cost 5k with a 1k counter and an on-play effect to play out a 4 cost or lower character. Okay, well, that would make sense, right? 4 costs, 5,000 power, and a 1k counter, and then an on-play effect. However, there's a lot of howevers in today's video, right? However, this on-play effect allows him to put out another 4 cost character. So now, for 4 Dawn, you're actually getting the value of about 8. Right? That's where it gets crazy. Because we can expect a 4 cost 5k, 1k counter card to have an on-play effect. That's actually pretty reasonable. But what is the on-play effect? So in terms of Jinbei, it is playing out a 4 cost or lower character. Now, of course, other than Jinbei, and it does have to be 7 Warlords. It does have some stipulations there, but I'm going to say one thing that I think they should have done. I've mentioned this in other videos before. I think one thing that would have balanced Jinbei a little more, because I do think it is slightly overtuned, I actually think that Jinbei should have been a 5 cost 6k with the 1k counter that has this exact effect. That has the exact effect. And then you could even take off the Jinbei part because it can't play out itself, because it would be a 5 cost 6k playing out a 4 cost or lower character. That's 7 Warlords. But you could keep the Jinbei part on. That part doesn't, it's not really relevant to what we're saying here. And understand what that would do for this character if they'd done it in that way, a 5 cost 6k with a 1k counter that cheats out of 4 or less. That's a 7 Warlords. Well, for 5 Dawn, you are still getting 9 Dawns worth of value. Bare minimum, right? Because what if you cheat out the Bower we talked about that's already a little bit overtuned? Right? At least overtuned in my personal opinion, judging by the vanilla stat line. So, okay, with that in mind, if they had made this into a 5 cost 6k, what does that do? All of a sudden, you are not able to cheat this card out with your leader's effect, the blue Doflamingo 7 Warlords leader from OP01, right? You would no longer be able to cheat this card out. That would cheat out another body. And with it being a 5 cost character, that would actually be very interesting, because going second, you still have your normal play. Turn 2, draw a card, or turn 1, going second, you can draw your card and do what you want to from there, right? And then on your turn 2, you can use a Perona and set your cards and start swinging and get some value that way, or play out play out whatever. Maybe play out the blocker Boa, play out your Trafalgar Law to bounce a card back, or whatever, right? It would all make sense. However, then your turn 3, you would play out a 5 cost Jinbei and play out a card from your hand and get a very big board in that way. I think that'd be really cool. So anyway, just to wrap up on Jinbei real quick, I think this card is very close to balance, but one more thing I want to mention when it comes to playing out characters, I think one thing that Bandai should get away from, to be fair, this is the only card that I'm aware of that does this. I think they need to stay far, far away from this idea of a character being able to cheat out a character that is the same cost as the character that did the on-play effect or whatever, and that used the effect to cheat it out. Like, for example, if this was a on-play that played out a 3 or less, I think that would have been more balanced, but then it has no synergy with the deck. But if they'd made it into a 5 cost 6k that cheats out a 4 or less, then I think it would have been completely fine. Okay, next up we got Trafalgar Law. We were just talking about this guy. So let's talk about this card. This is a 4 cost 5k with a 1k counter, okay, and it has an on-play effect. Okay, seems pretty balanced, right? But this goes in the same idea as the Jinbei, where look at the on-play effect. You get to return one of your cards to your hand. I mean, some people would see that as a downside, but anyone who plays Blue Doflamingo knows that is not a downside. That is very rarely a downside. You're typically going to bounce your own Trafalgar Law back that you're using the effect with, or one of your searchers, or one of your top 5 setters, right? But so you're going to return a card back to your hand, and then you're going to bounce a 4 or less back to the owner's hand. So I'm going to say the same thing about Jinbei here. I do not think that a character that has a cost of whatever, let's just say it's the cost of 4 in this case, I don't think they should be able to bounce back a 4 or less to the owner's hand. If they're a 7 cost character, I don't think they should be able to bounce back a 7 cost to the owner's hand. Especially in this case where you can actually do tricks where you can start bouncing this guy back and reusing the effects and things like that over and over again. I think it creates a unhealthy game state potentially. I don't know how to say that, like an unhealthy format potentially. That's all I'm going to say there. But this card, if I were to kind of, like, I think this card is slightly overtuned. I think this card should not have been able to bounce back a 4 or less. I think it should have. I think it should have been be able to bounce back a 3 or less. That's what I think personally. But yeah, you guys tell me what y'all think in the comment section below. All right, now we have a few more of these guys. We have a few more of these cards. Let me get back to here, and now we're going to zoom in on Burgess. And check this one out, guys. Here's another card where it's like, well, wait a minute. It looks like we're a little bit overstated. We're a little bit overtuned. This is a 4 cost 5k with a 1k counter. Okay, well, it has 2 effects, right? It doesn't just have one. It looks like just one big paragraph if you read it from top to bottom like this, but that's actually 2 different effects, isn't it? This character cannot be KO'd by your opponent's effects. Whoa. That's already very strong. Well, there's the 1k counter that's missing. But wait a minute. If your leader has the Blackbeard Pirates type, this character gains plus 1,000 power for every 4 cards in your trash. So this card ends up being a literal 4 cost 8, 9, 10, whatever K. This massive character, and that is extremely overstated in my personal opinion. And if they wanted to do that effect, I think they should have dropped him to 4k to 4,000 power. Or actually, let me say 2 things. I think it should be he got dropped down to 4,000 power, and then even maybe potentially push this up to plus every 5 cards, plus 1,000 for every 5 cards. Or this is the one other one I'll say. I actually think this card should have been a 4 cost 5k 1k counter with the effect it has to go plus 1,000 every 4 cards, but get rid of the cannot be KO'd by effects, and I think that would have been more balanced. Okay, I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit, guys. These are just my opinions on these. I'm trying to show you guys how power creep is slowly working its way into the game, right? We already talked about Brook a little bit in the very beginning slide. We won't spend too much time on this. This is a card, though, where let's just do the math on it. Okay, 3 costs for a 4,000 power body and 1k counter. Okay, and it has non-play effect. Oh, wait, it also has a when attacking effect, right? And when you look at older versions of removal, a lot of times you had to trash a card from your hand just to do it. This card doesn't require that at all, and it just does what it does. It just removes cards like crazy. Okay, now let's move over to the other side again here, guys, and check out the Gum Gum Giant. This card is a very hot topic right now on the far right, guys. Gum Gum Giant, the purple event. I wasn't really focusing on events for this video. I was more focusing on the characters because the stat lines are very set. Events would need their entire own video, but this is another card that some people consider to be a little overtuned, or a little bit too strong. We're not going to spend much time on this, like I said, because it's an event. I'd rather focus on the stat lines of characters. Okay, and then last but not least, we actually have Cavendish here. This is a 5 cost, 6,000 power, 1k counter with an on-play effect. Perfect. Okay, and the on-play effect is really strong and limited to only supernova leaders, right? Seems fine. But then it also has a win attacking. And that might be the one thing that pushes this character slightly over the edge, where it's like, actually, I would rather what they had done here, I would have rather they made this a 5 cost 5k with a 1k counter, take off the restriction of supernova leaders only and have it be an on-play when attacking in that way. And I think it would have been slightly more balanced. Okay. All right. So we're almost done now, guys. Now we're going to look into the future a little bit. So I will give you guys a spoiler warning for this one. Okay, next up we have Chopper. It looks, and guys, I will have to kind of tell you what these say if you don't know what they do already, because these are not, the high quality versions are not available yet in English at the time of me recording this, so I could only grab the Japanese high quality versions, but I will tell you what all these cards do. Understand, guys, that this is a 4 cost, 4,000 power, 2k counter. Okay, already I really love that stat line. I think that's very good. And I think that's, especially to have, and it has blocker. Just so you guys know, this orange shape here, this is blocker. Okay, that would have been excellent in my opinion. It's a 4 cost card with a 4,000 power and a 2k counter and blocker. Perfect. Perfect as is. I think it's great. However, there's another however, right, guys? This has plus 2,000 power on your opponent's turn. That is where this card gets a little bit crazy, right? This card gets a little bit out of hand in that way, in my opinion. And, by the way, for those who are not aware from OP 10, where this card comes out in OP 10, right? This card is going to be played in a leader. It could potentially be played in a leader called, it's Red Green Smoker. And that will give it a further plus 1,000 power on your opponent's turn. And yes, this affects your opponent's turn only. I'm sorry, I should have specified. Like I said, guys, unfortunately, we don't have the high-quality English translations when I'm recording this. But guys, this ends up being a 4-cost, 7,000 power 2K counter blocker on your opponent's turn, right? A 2K counter in hand, and it has 2 relevant types, which is something we didn't talk a lot about, but sometimes names, types, and colors are very relevant, right? They're always very relevant, but sometimes more so than others. And this is Tony Chopper in Punk Hazard. So this ends up being a searchable card for Punk Hazard with Virgo and a 4-cost 7K 2K counter blocker. That is starting to push into the realm of extremely powerful, right, in the power creep department, right? Okay, let's go to the next card. Next card here is Smoker. You guys knew I was going to mention this card. I'm gonna tell you what the card does. Real quick, it's a 5-cost, 7,000 power character, no counter, and it has Banish. Okay, that would have been fine right there, right? That would have been a very balanced card with a very relevant effect. But it has more than just Banish, doesn't it? This card has an effect down here at the bottom that says Activate Main. Okay, it's not on play. It is an Activate Main effect that allows you to stand one of your Dawn that is rested as active. Seems good, right? Seems very good. I didn't quote it perfectly, obviously, guys, but I'm just giving you an idea of what it does. So when you add that secondary effect at the bottom, guys, it becomes really, really powerful. And a lot of people, I think, would argue this is a little bit power crept at this point. Same thing with the 4-cost 7K Tony Chopper that looks like Sanji that we just talked about. It's like, okay, where are we going with this? We have to be very careful. And then one more card. I don't know if this one's necessarily power crept. I might defend this card more than anything, but I think some people will say that it is power crept. So this is another one here, guys. It's a 6-cost, 7,000 power Luffy that has, if your leader is multicolored and your opponent has 5 or more Dawn cards on the field, this character has Rush. So it ends up being a 6-cost, 7,000 power character with Rush. That's not really that crazy. In fact, I would consider that fairly balanced. A 6-cost 7K with Rush. That's another card I didn't add on here, guys. I think the 3-cost 5,000 power Rush card Zoro, I actually think that card is slightly overstated. I think a 3-cost 4K Rush would have been very balanced, even without a counter, because I think any card that is basically 4 to 5 cost and under is a little bit, with Rush, I think that should be considered plus, a 2,000 power deficit, if you will. For the little system, the system we're using. But again, guys, I did not include every card on here. These are just the first examples that came to my head that I thought were good examples. But let's get back to this Luffy now. So this Luffy ends up being a 6-cost, 7,000 power character with no counter and situational rush. But it doesn't just have that effect. It also has another effect. When attacking once per turn, you can put 2 of your Dawn cards active, 2 of your active Dawn cards back to your Dawn deck and stand this character up. So that will allow him to attack in again for the turn. Now, you do take a life card when you do that, so there's like a little bit of a balance there, and that is something that really complicates. That really complicates when you're trying to determine the value of a card and like the effects and things like that. Is like, okay, well, what if I have to return Dawn? How much should that take off of the, how much of a discount should that be on the value I'm trying to get out of these cards when they're, especially when the designers are making them? Or if I take a life card, what kind of discount can that give me? How much extra value can I pull out of the cost of this card by taking my own life card, right? Stuff like that. Okay, so that's about it here, though, guys. I will say this. I think this purple Luffy is a little bit power crept, but out of all 3 on this page, I think the Chopper and the Smoker are the strongest on this page for what they're doing, but that's not to say that purple Luffy is not very, very strong. Okay, as it should be, being 1 cost more. Okay, so that's actually about it, guys. We're going to wrap it up now. I want to go to this final slide here. I'll actually even, I'll bring my my face camera back to the bottom right corner here. To finish, now that we have seen 1K and 2K counter vanillas, characters with no base effect, right? I hope the next thing Bandai experiments with is 0K no counter vanillas. What would that look like? Like what you see on the left here. Guys, I cannot express to you how many cards are not played because they have no counter, okay? Even those little one-cost blockers we saw at the very, or towards the middle of the slideshow, a lot of those never got played because they don't have a counter. They're just a brick in hand. We can't always save one Dawn active to play them out. Excuse me. But in the case of this right here with the vanilla cards, I love what they're doing. So, okay, 5 cost, 7k power, 1k counter vanilla. That is your standard character there, right? And I like how now we're starting to see 5 cost, 6,000 power, 2k counters. I am a huge fan of that. I think it's a great new direction for the game, and I think that will open up some really big design space. But I think there's still one major area. I mean, there's other things too, but I think there's still one major area that Bandai has not tapped into yet for the vanillas. And hey, you got to give them time. The game's still young, but I would love to see these no counter vanillas. So 5 cost, 8,000 power characters with no base effect, or like what you see on the left here, a 4 cost 7k. Guys, you guys, okay, for whoever plays the game, you know, at the time of me recording this video, there are a lot of leaders that are starting to push into the, there are some leaders that are starting to push into the 6,000 and 7,000 power range pretty consistently. So would it be that crazy to see a vanilla character that gets plus 3,000 power instead of the plus 2 and a 1k counter? Because we're starting to see the other way around, where we're seeing like a 5 cost 6k vanilla with a 2k counter. I don't think it'd be too far out of the question, and I think they could also build some really cool designs into that. Like, think of like Calgara, for example, right? The leader Calgara. Sorry, I don't have the slide available right now, but there's a leader in this game called Calgara. When you attach a Dawn, you can swing in and play out a character based off how much Dawn you have, and you take a life card for it. So you're cheating it out to get some potential, major upsides. And the best card they play typically is a 6 cost 8k Calgara. Imagine if there was a 4 cost 7k vanilla card, a 4 cost 7k with no base effect. That is, the type they need to cheat it out. That would be really interesting, and it would make leader effects like that very viable. I think it would increase the power of those decks by a good amount. And it comes at a drawback, right? Because that card is dead in hand otherwise. That is a brick in your hand. You're going to have to, use a 0 cost event to get rid of it, or some type of cycle, or play it out. So yeah. All right, that's it, guys. That's it. I hope y'all enjoyed this. This was this is something I did whip together for everyone. I'm hoping you guys at least feel similar to me on this. It's okay if you guys don't 100% agree on everything I'm saying here, but where does the community stand on this issue? And do you guys see power creep is starting to come into the game as being an issue, or are you happy with the direction it's going? And do you think that power creep has not hit a point yet where it is an issue? Because I think there are people on each side of the fence, right? I think some people might think like, okay, power creep's becoming an issue, and so on and so forth, and you can state your argument there, where it might be something along the lines of, I don't want them to start breaking away from the vanilla, the vanilla value of some of these cards, because I think they should base this entire game's value system the same way they have been, which is around the vanilla cards. And these cards that start breaking out of that mold, that push the power creep, in an extreme way, I think that becomes very dangerous. That's just my personal stance on it. Or, guys, tell me, are you somewhere in the middle? Or I shouldn't say on the middle yet. Are you on the other side of that? Do you want to see the game hit a little bit higher of a power creep and then stabilize? I don't think that's the worst idea. I don't think it's the worst idea. I could see it working. I think there's some potential. I think the other way is better. The first way I mentioned, where we keep everything based around the vanilla chassis, if you will, the vanilla body. I think all the games should be balanced around that idea that they came up with, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. Where the power of the character is the cost times 1,000 plus 2,000 with a 1k counter, so you have 3,000 power to move around however you need to make interesting new dynamic characters. But how far do some people want to see it get pushed? That's my question. Okay, or now I should say, or are you somewhere in between where you don't want to see it get too much more power creep, but maybe just enough to make everything where it is now more balanced? However they do that, I have no idea. You tell me. All right, hope y'all enjoyed, guys. I'm done. Please do not forget to like and subscribe if you have not already, guys. I really appreciate it. It helps me out big time when y'all do that. The liking and subscribing is big time. Let me go ahead and put up the outro page here. Guys, if you are... Now I definitely have to move my camera. Guys, if you are liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, viewing my content, or anything like that, it helps me out big time. I really appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody who supports this channel, guys, whether you did it through Patreon, PayPal, donations, buying a playmat, YouTube member, or became a YouTube member, or hopped on the Discord and became a part of that community. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. All right. Hope y'all enjoyed. Please do not forget to like, subscribe. Until next time, guys. Peace.